All right, so welcome everyone. We're here at the panel at the end of an Open RAN session, and we're going to talk about not just Open RAN, but more about private wireless, which we've been talking about since Stéphane's presentation that opened the session, all the way to the role of potentially an Open RU, which we've talked about as well. So we're going to try to tie some of these together. Well, we're going to have a wide-ranging discussion. We're going to explain why is it that private wireless hasn't taken off? We'll go into all the 100 reasons why. We'll explain the role that Open RU can break it open, and once you have autonomous RU, everything will magically fix itself because it's autonomous, self-healing. But regardless, we'll kick it off. I think we'll set context again, and let's start with someone who actually deploys private wireless and has experience on the ground with various vendors and has seen all the challenges and the success of it. So let's start with John Pauly from Cal Poly. I'll introduce each of you as we go along, which might as well just do that because I think most of the audience may have seen everyone present except for John Pauly for Cal Poly, but you can probably provide context as you answer this. So what are the main challenges today for private wireless deployments? Is it lack of spectrum licenses? Is it user equipment readiness? Is it cost? Lack of deployment expertise, lack of awareness about private wireless options. So John, why don't you start by introducing yourself, and then you can go ahead and answer the question.
Well, sure. A quick answer is all of the above, but to introduce myself, unlike this crew, I'm coming from the outside of the telco world. I had a career in energy, oil and gas. I worked for Chevron as an enterprise architect for about 15 years. In the field, working on control systems. We had about 20,000 upstream assets here in California, brought in the UAS program, advanced wireless, which is where I got plugged into CBRS, private wireless. We'd been doing private wireless for a very long time for field automation and control, but not cellular. Bringing cellular into the field was new and exciting. And I had the opportunity to take that experience to Cal Poly, where the CIO asked me to stand up a 5G innovation lab. Roy was kind enough to be there for our grand opening. We had partners in T-Mobile, Federated Wireless at the time, and Amazon Web Services. We were following the legacy we had with the cloud computing innovation model, with AWS being co-located, so we could really bring the students, industry, faculty into a common space, take on challenges, and solve all of the above obstacles that existed in the private wireless market that I'd seen in industry, and hopefully make some advances. And we've been chipping away at that block for about 3 years now. We work in both spaces. We have an operational side for bringing private wireless, private cellular networks to the campus to support the campus, and then we work with the faculty and industry partners, NTIA and others, on more of the R&D side, Open RAN in this community. So, did you want me to highlight a couple of the real pain points?
Yeah, real pain points, not fake pain points.
All right.
Real pain points, real challenges that you've encountered. And I'm going to forward the slide so that everyone can see your names up there. I noticed that we actually have a slide with your names. And if I click that, they can actually see your names. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think Roy hit spectrum, the vendor ecosystem. You have entrenched IT staff in your organization. You've got budgets. I mean, all of those are just thorns in your side. And you feel like you fix one, another one falls out. The carriers are kind of right there, top of my list right now. FCC's equal, if not worse. So yes, it's a very challenging environment. It's already complicated from a technical perspective, let alone all the politics that now get lumped into it. But we are continually able to demonstrate value, find those bespoke opportunities. For us, it's being the California CSU kind of anchor institution in technology. Ag is really important for us.
Yeah, agriculture.
Campus safety is important for us, agriculture, yeah. And really we've been leaning into Open RAN when we talk about the utilities, public utilities, my background in oil and gas, but now PG&E, utility space, power line transmission, water, critical infrastructure in general is something that has a lot of opportunity and value. And to the point about not having to race to the bottom of the cost, these are industries that are used to paying high dollar because their applications are so critical, reliability is top of mind. So that's where we're seeing some room to move, and we'll deal with the challenges as they come.
Yeah, so thanks John. And I know you've successfully deployed private wireless in actual real-world situations for agriculture, and so I think that's valuable. I'm going to sort of broaden a bit and go sort of beyond Cal Poly, which is certainly a good example, and look at sort of sort of rest of the world situation. And Stéphane's traveled all over the world looking at all sorts of deployments of private wireless and Open RAN. And so why is it that China is more successful with private wireless networks? Now, you talked a little bit about that earlier in your presentation. Why is it more successful than the rest of the world, for those who were not paying attention earlier? But more importantly, are there lessons that we can learn? And are there lessons that we can't use just because it's China?
No, it's, well, I mean, China is a very different world, you know, with a very different system. And that means the government basically is dictating what everyone has to do. When you run a, you know, whatever the company is, but if you think about Jack Ma, you know, very successful with Alibaba, but he got, you know,
deprioritized
with the government. But I mean, this is an example. So what happened is, with LTE, long-term evolution, remember that, 4G? Well, actually, LTE is still 3G. It's, if you put 4G, actually LTE advanced is 4G. You still have 450 networks in the world that are on plain LTE, which is now not 4G, and forget about 5G. So China was behind on LTE, and that means they didn't start at the same time as the world. At the same time, when they were actually starting LTE rollouts, LTE was already being used in mining. For example, you go to Rio Tinto in Australia, and this was actually at that time, 2016, the largest private wireless in the world. So, you know, in China, they don't like that, because at that time, actually, Huawei was big in Australia, but didn't get the contract. So, you know, there is a kind of rivalry, revenge. So then, on 5G, what happened is, well, first, you know, at the standard, Huawei did a fantastic job to move the NSA agenda. But the thing is, when they started 5G in 2020, well, they started deployment in 2019, but in 2020, they switched the standalone mode when the rest of the world was doing NSA. At that time, I remember seeing already thousands of industrial use cases in China. They said, we missed the LTE boat, but now we have lots of robots. Back in 2019, China had more robots than all the rest of the world put together. And they were thinking, we're going to have a problem, demographic problem. We won't have enough people actually to work in these factories. And of course, the tariffs, you know, we're talking about, were not there. So they wanted to automate as much as possible. And this was a government mandate saying, okay, now we have 5G SA, use it. And then, you know, since 2020, 5 years later, you have thousands of factories equipped with 5G SA. And, you know, also the game, China was also monitoring, watching the Lighthouse Network project. I don't know if you are aware of this one. It's a World Economic Forum plus McKinsey. So they have been looking at automation, factory automation with whatever connectivity you want to bring. It can be Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, LTE, whatever. And so China was monitoring that and was not, you know, among the top in the world. And all of a sudden, boom, you know, they passed everybody and they have thousands of factories equipped with 5G. Yeah. So this is the story.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Industrial, you know, Industry 4.0, driving 5G, that is an important use case. Manufacturing, certainly that's one of the key things. And I think that actually we can learn. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't apply it, you know, outside of China as well. So speaking of that, as manufacturing is one of the use cases, or industrial manufacturing, are there any hot use cases beyond the typical manufacturing, logistics, transportation, mining, which you brought up? I mean, Rio Tinto we're always using for as an example for a long time, right? Healthcare, or even oil and gas, right? You know, back to John's background. So I'm going to ask Dr. Femi, you also travel around the world, work with a lot of customers, you see a lot of use cases. What other use cases are there beyond the ones that we're familiar with? And is there a horizontal use case in the form of neutral hosts that could drive private wireless?
There are a lot of use cases that could drive private wireless. You mentioned a few in terms of healthcare. So we use the word private. Maybe we should just focus on networks. The distinctions that are being made today are the differences between when you have ubiquitous network or you have just Wi-Fi based networks. The use cases that we will continue to see or see a lot more of are the things that are going to deal with latency. So when you talk about the healthcare, we will see a lot more with healthcare. We have not really done a lot with smart cities. And I think we will see a lot more around smart cities, where cities themselves will have their own networks that they can then manage, operate, even sell to their communities from a private point of view. The last one that I will mention that we have not really focused on is also rural. The rural communities are really struggling because they don't have a lot of MNOs that serves them, and so depending on the configuration of the architecture, private network will actually benefit the rural communities, and will spur a lot of innovation in my mind with respect to whatever they are doing in the rural area, whether that's farming. So I think what has not spurred the growth is what Stéphane mentioned. In China, there's a government mandate. So it's almost as if you're going from private to actually making it a public use case. In US or in North America, let me use the word North America, the incentive is not there. When mobility on campuses, that's another use case. When mobility is not the primary use case, like in factories, or Wi-Fi is just okay, then we don't worry so much about, do I go into a private network environment? But now, what we're seeing is a refresh of the network. Yes, we're going from 4.0, 5.0, so 6.0 and 7.0 in Wi-Fi, but now mobility becomes an issue, whether in components within factory talking to each other, healthcare, where I have to worry about serious latencies that Wi-Fi will not handle. And I think university campuses will also become an area where this is going to be of interest. Don't forget, MNOs still have businesses to serve, where if there is not enough population, why should I go and put a tower there? And so private network will serve in those communities and serve very well.
Yeah, I think that rural use case is certainly there. The agriculture use case, that John was talking about, is there. And I think the criticality of these networks are going to become more and more important, especially in industrial manufacturing. And we wish that the governments would either mandate it or make it really easy to put private networks in place. But as John is saying, it seems like right now there's a push back against some of that.
Yeah, and I think there's another evolution in the factory that's happening. There's just more stuff, and everything wants to be connected. It was one thing where Wi-Fi was good enough because you had a handful of devices, but now everything wants to talk wirelessly to something. And so to meet the demands of an automated, it's just Wi-Fi starts to creak and break, and enterprises are realizing this more and more. It was good enough for a time, but as more of this connected technology lands in the shop, you have to rethink it a bit.
Yeah, and if I'm an MNO, I'd say there's opportunity for me. I shall bring my spectrum into the situation and manage a network on your behalf, as opposed to let the enterprise, which probably knows better about its own business, right? But I think that's going to be a battle. MNOs knows networks, or so they claim, at least in the macro level. Enterprises who believe they know their business better, and maybe they know networks better in a private situation. I don't know how does that play out?
So there are two things around that. One is when you go from Wi-Fi to ubiquitous network, LTE 5G, the management is different. The maintenance is different. IT that deals with Wi-Fi, they're not ready to deal with, PLMN, EPC. So that's another aspect of why we have not seen that much growth. Because now you are talking about investment, a different investment in terms of sustaining those networks. So the use cases are there, but then I have to balance between investing in these new resources versus bringing what I know that I need, but how do I support it? Yeah. I mean, we had a case just this week where that decision was made to go with Wi-Fi because it's very easy. Next one. Yeah. Although they know that they need ubiquitous connectivity, so we're still struggling with a host of those.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it's also, I think it's also incumbent upon the vendors to make it easy, right? As easy to deploy and manage as Wi-Fi, and I know a lot of the private wireless vendors are pushing on that front, but it's still not the same yet, right? Yeah. So maybe there is a opportunity here with Brad's, presentation on, what role does Open RAN have, and you don't have to answer that one, but the Open RU, right, or the autonomous RU, right? What could that play in accelerating private networks? I know already some of the examples you gave tie into the industrial settings that we just talked about. But any thoughts here, Brad?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Dell's focus is U.S. federal 5G private wireless, and a lot of what I think the open community can bring to the market along the lines of full end-to-end ecosystem supply chain security, for example. So if you have a large US-based corporation that specializes in manufacturing and has proven that they can do it for a good price and over again for the last 40 years, you actually have a very natural fit there. So that whole security of supply is a very important aspect, especially for our customers. If we go back to your first question, for example, our customers are very much aware of the benefits of Open RAN, and we see that the US government, notwithstanding the current regime necessarily, but from the NTIA perspective and some of the earlier initiatives, we're very much focused on making sure that Open RAN came to at least the US government. And I'm not exactly sure why they think that that's necessary, other than it's probably a lower cost model at some point. They're going to be, I've been told, and perhaps some of the folks on the panel can help me with this one, but that the US government manages a network the size of AT&T's. If you add up all of the different aspects of the US government, everybody from the IRS to DOD. So it's a big network. It's not something small. I mean, they're going to probably have small orders, but for campus deployments and things like that, but it's not, they're not a small customer in that sense. I think to John's point and to Dr. Femi's point is it has a lot to do with simplicity. We have, if we can't make it simple, the IT guy is going to win. The guy whose job it is to not get fired is going to go with the Wi-Fi solution because he's used to installing Meraki. Yeah. And that's just the way it is. But when you add in mobility and the extra requirements that you're going to see, how do we make that easier? Perhaps, and I didn't cover this in my presentation, but perhaps an autonomous RU is one way to go. Perhaps the value add could be if your orchestration suite has access all the way down to an autonomous RU. Autonomous RU doesn't necessarily mean that it's fully autonomous. It could be partially autonomous, or it could be policy driven. And that sort of aspect of controlling the network could be a big benefit in a sense. If there was a software overlay that goes along with your orchestration, you could actually implement that on a campus by campus basis, for example. I just want to check my notes here. One of the big problems I think we have from Open RAN, I mean, when did we start? 2017, 2018?
Open RAN was around that.
Right, and one of the things that we saw early on was a lot of information about how the commodity RU was going to save all of the MNOs huge amounts of money. 30% cost reduction is going to be great. Unfortunately, that would lead to zero innovation or one and done type of tier 2 production. I think that here we are 8 years later, there's still not a lot of proof points that Open RAN is going to be successful, and we often hear, you know, what is it, was that famous politician that said, news of my demise is,
Yeah,
you know, but I think there's a lot, I think Open RAN has a long way to go still. I think it's a lot of what the specifications from Open RAN have done for us, especially with the open front haul, is that's here to stay now.
Yeah.
And people are working on that. Tier 2s have invested in it. There's been a lot of money spent. But if you take that and you have your private wireless customers, your overlays, your software simplification layers, all of that is going to play into to ultimately making this successful. And I think it's, you know, for all of what we've seen over the last 5-6 years, where the incumbents have tried really hard to make Open RAN less easy to implement. I'm sharing my own political view here. I think it's going to happen anyway. I think we have no choice.
I mean, FHI, the Open FHI, certainly, you know, front haul interface has definitely, you know, been successful. The SMO portion is probably successful as well, right? I think those two, you know, are we going to ever separate a CU and DU? I don't know. Doesn't seem to make sense, right?
Well, I think
yeah, it doesn't make sense, right? So, but that's okay. We got something out of it, right? And I think fundamentally, if we have an open architecture, and I think the hope was that the white box manufacturers would look at that, kind of like switching, right, or servers, and say, oh, that was a dream anyway. Like, oh, it's pretty cool. Look, that's a market, and we will start manufacturing those as well. And I think what the outcome was on top of Huawei, Nokia, and Ericsson, we managed to get Fujitsu, we managed to get, you know, Samsung coming in. So the market opened up on the radios, and Mavenir for a little while was in there, and other people, right? So, there was some openness, right, to that. There was more diversity. And the hope is with private wireless that, because you're not trying to build a 64TR, right, that there are even more, there's potential for more diversity if you can find the use case and the ability to drive that, right?
No, but more from not just the diversity. To me, the biggest part of what I believe Open has done, in addition to front haul and small, the open interface allows you to actually have access to a lot more part of the network. And then you can talk about zero-touch provisioning. You can talk about automation. The biggest problem for operators is, how do I manage this thing? With private networks, now you can actually do that much, much better. Somebody else can do that for you. So when we talk about IT gridlock, that can be opened up. So yes, Open RAN is still on its way to success. I want to see more of the 100,000 radios being deployed and CUDUs. But I think the open interface has actually done us well in terms of how we automate. People are now talking about AI having access to the RAN. It's because of open interfaces.
Fair.
So, and I think we need to extend that now to private networks. And begin to articulate the benefit of all of those things, so that our industry collectively can enjoy that.
That's fair.
And that's where I get excited, because now it's easy for me to put a core, a CU, a DU, and a radio in front of a student, whereas that was never an opportunity for me only 20 years ago. Now these students have access to this. They can play with these interfaces. They can build these tools, and trying to gear up and get them ready for the workforce, and the industries need this talent pipeline. That's one of the spaces that we've really been trying to drive at.
Yeah, no, that's very fair.
I think that's a really good point for Dr. Femi and Jonathan as well. I wouldn't be able to think about an ML-enabled RU if I had to go to Shista and ask and beg and kneel for permission to do something like that, and also be shut out of any kind of conversation. and it's well known. But I think that none of, to your points, none of this innovation would be possible if we hadn't gone down the path that we've gone down so far. And so maybe we're in the valley of despair at the moment, but I think we're going to come to the hill, what is it? The hill of enlightenment is next.
Yeah, the slope of, we'll see Stéphane's slides next year, and we're going to be like on that trajectory.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we'll all be like.
I mean, for private wireless, I mean, we're starting from a low base, so it's going to go up. It can only go up.
It can only go up.
It will be adopted, but we're going to have to be patient because, when you have to look at what a factory is trying to achieve, or a mine or whatever, and you have many systems that have to be on that network. And because I'm thinking about the smart buildings, we have seen some very interesting development where basically the first thing you need is a PON, passive optical network. If you don't have the PON, forget about the rest. And so you have the PON, you have fiber in the building, and then you add actually a 5G network. And on that 5G network, you're gonna run elevators, air conditioning, the electricity, everything that is going to be on that network. So you see, it's different from a factory, but you have to incorporate all these factors. And we see actually the emergence of smart buildings. And I mean, you have hundreds of thousands in the US that will need to be upgraded at some point. So there is a lot of work to be done because you have to bring fiber, in the first place. So, and that makes me think of that CRAN discussion from the gentleman from NTT. And Roy, you mentioned CU separate from DU. Actually, in Japan, yes, there is a strong case. It's a disaster because they learned from Fukushima. During the Fukushima disaster in March 2011, after that, it took years to rebuild the 3G network at a time Japan was running out LTE. And that's how the Japanese government, had brainstorming session. And actually, I participated in some of these sessions about, can we do a better job than that of building, these stupid, dumb, static networks? And then came, the idea of disaggregating the BBU, because in Japan, what they are doing is actually putting a DU somewhere that is attached through fiber to a bunch of sites. And with Open RAN, as I said, you have the freedom of choice because it took forever to get, these damn BBUs from NEC Fujitsu back in the days.
Yeah. Fair. So you disaggregate, you force competition, then you can probably drive it to market.
So now, they know that if something happens, and it's going to happen, it's not if, no, it's a question of when.
Yeah.
They know how to rebuild the network very quickly.
I can buy someone else's DU if you can't get it to me in time. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, one of the thought is that, here we are in Open RAN, and I know there's some interest, but out there on AI land, there's like so much more interest. If we could just convince the OCP and the folks here that your telemetry network, your out-of-band network in any AI data center has to run on private 5G, right? For all telemetry, right? Your flows and your manifolds, your servers, right? All of that has to be accessible by private 5G in the density, right? Then we'll take off, right? Just mandate an OCP standard, right?
Yeah, that's a really great point. We've been seeing that the out-of-band communications, I think Stanford had that as well, not only for operations, but these fires we've been having in California are wiping out communications. Yeah. Your Wi-Fi, the carriers are going down, power's going down, you have communities going dark for multiple days, and we're seeing interest from, there needs to be this other thing that's out of band.
Private 5G, all you need is a little ad that says, everything else went down. My Wi-Fi went down, my fiber went down, my 800 gig network went down, but you know what stayed up? My private 5G network.
Yeah, and it's not a huge investment. You can harden that, you can make it, there's a lot of different ways you would design that to sustain a disaster.
Yeah, so now we know what to ask of OCPs. We'll just mandate every rack design, every server design, every sled design, right, has to have a 5G element in there. That's it. All right. Well, what else? So let me just wrap it up here, and before maybe ask the audience if they have questions. What's the, you've been around, you've seen, the wonderful MGX wall with all those parts, right? Any interesting takeaways that could be applicable to trying to accelerate private wireless or Open RAN, any other ideas that you've seen out there that could apply, aside from the crazy one we just talked about?
Mine is not an idea about what I've seen out there, but there's still a challenge that I believe that if we accelerate it, we will have more of open networks. Spectrum is a big problem. It's a big issue. CBRS, for people like me who build infrastructure, I want to aggregate as much as possible and then build one and then apply that to all. CBRS helped me with that. With CBRS now waffling, with the government talking about taking it away, giving it to somebody else, it creates another problem with spectrum. Yeah. To get something from the MNOs, very expensive. So sharing anything that can help us to share spectrum that we can then apply to private network. If something that is out there from AI that can do that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I know it keeps Jonathan up at night.
Yeah, it does. I really liked the commentary around sensing networks. I guess that was more of a 6G point that you made. I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic with these RUs, but then what does it look like when the radio is used both ways? I'm fascinated by what that's going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Anything, Stéphane?
Yeah, I mean, one aspect of Open RAN we didn't talk about is RAN sharing, actually. Yeah. And that's going to be very useful in the situation of neutral host, because we're talking about, for example, this convention center. Mm-hmm. So if you want a private wireless network, and in fact, this is happening now. It's actually emerging. Boldy Networks is a great example. Freshwave in the UK is another example of building an Open RAN for the purpose of RAN sharing. Smart cities, so you mentioned smart cities, so you have the tower companies actually getting into smart cities like Vantage Tower in Europe, and they are looking at Open RAN as an enabler. So things are looking good. There are many ideas everywhere in the world, and it's moving in the right direction.
That's good.
Yeah.
Brad, last word.
I think one of the thoughts that struck me yesterday during the keynote speeches was more than one of the speakers put up a chart that showed where they were when they joined OCP in 2015, 2017, that sort of thing, and then how it's grown over the years from 450 people or something in the first couple of years to 11,000 this year. I kind of feel like we're maybe at our 2017 moment here from an open radio perspective. And I'm looking forward to maybe not being here in 7 years, but in 7 years coming back and meeting Jonathan's students and them telling me about how they've started a company that deploys private wireless and takes the complexity out of the hands of the IT departments, and how they've written scripts to overlay on an autonomous RU that has that ability to, even if it's shared RAN, it can still provide the data to each one of the RAN vendors. I mean, one of the things that we hear about shared RAN that's a problem is they say, well, we don't want to go through somebody else's radio because we don't know how that radio is going to affect our signal. We engineer a network. We want to make sure that we get maximum coverage. We don't get that from a shared RAN. But if the radio itself were giving you pure radio level reports, like on linearity and gain and output power, all that sort of stuff, it could give it to all of the vendors equally and help them. And with spectrum sharing, maybe they shift around. If one of the vendors' customers are not using all their spectrum, maybe they can, come up with some kind of an overlay where they can optimize the spectrum use and powered by the data that's generated by the fact that you actually have a radio that has ML on it that's already generating data. It's kind of it's a circle. It depends on where you want to sit on the circle.
Excellent.
I think that's great where Lucas is out there, but these test beds that we're starting to spin up so we can actually get these ideas out there and execute them. We're taking the students to Swanton Ranch this weekend, 3,200 acres uncovered. We're getting after that. And then the airport, but I think it's great for this community to actually get out there, put the kit out, test it, validate it, see what works. And I think Lucas is doing a great job in Brazil doing the same thing.
Yep, excellent. So on that note, I'm on a hopeful note, looking forward, and hopefully the next generation will solve all our problems, and the students will. Thank you, panelists, and thank you to the audience for being here today, and for the Open RAN. This concludes the Open RAN special session, and hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.